Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we're going to cover the brand new for 2020 Fender 70th Anniversary Broadcaster. But hey, doesn't this look like a Telecaster? Well, if you're confused, let's do a little bit of history. So the Fender Telecaster actually started out with a few different names. Its initial creation of a guitar that looked like this was called the Esquire. It did not have a truss rod in it, and it could either have a 1 pickup or 2 pickup configuration. But in late 1950, the original Telecaster is born, and it is named the Broadcaster. The biggest difference between the Broadcaster and the Esquire is it is Fender's first electric guitar to have a truss rod in it. Some people actually like the sound of non-truss rodded versions, but then, yeah, you're gonna have some issues down the line. So this was the original name for the Fender Telecaster, the Broadcaster, but then Fender gets a cease and desist telegram from Gretsch saying, hey, we've got a drum kit called the Broadcaster with a K. You cannot use that. So that ended the lifespan of the Broadcaster very quickly. There's approximately only 250 of these guys even made in the original 1950 year. So Leo Fender, being a very thrifty guy, he just had the people cut off the Broadcaster from the decal. If you see it in the light just right, it's just a large decal, so they just chopped that off and just had Fender on the headstock. And this thing did not have a name for about a year. And now we refer to those guitars as the Nocasters, which has to be my favorite iteration because I just love that nickname. But they eventually thought of something better, the Telecaster. Fender USA 70th Anniversary. Essentially what they've done is they brought back the Broadcaster name. They gave it a nitro finish see-through blonde finish on a 2-piece ash body. So that allows you to see all that wood grain underneath, which is kind of an interesting vibe to these guys. They give it that super chunky U-neck shape profile. But another interesting thing is the phenolic pickguard. It's that whole Blackguard Tele vibe. If you take the bridge cover off, that's optional to have on there. They've actually reissued where they put the serial numbers on the originals, so that's where your serial number is for this instrument, not on the back of the headstock or at the back of the neck plate. And most importantly, they gave it custom shop 5051 Blackguard pickups. These things are supposed to sound very close to the originals. And something else that's unique for this run is the original Broadcasters and original Telecasters actually had a blend circuit, where the neck pickup was kind of like a more jazzy sound. It was very dark because they had a resistor. And the middle position was actually the neck pickup without that in the circuit, so it would sound more regular. And then you had your bridge pickup that you could then blend the neck pickup in with what would normally be your tone control right down here. But they shipped these things with the regular Telecaster setup. So essentially with the USA model, they just paid tribute to the original Broadcaster design, brought back the neck and some of the specs. But what are my first opinions of this $2,000 instrument? I think the first thing that everybody sees when they pull one of these out of the case is the see-through blonde finish. I think this is my first see-through finish from Fender, and it kind of took me a minute to get used to this because the wood grain's kind of like a dark gray color. I'll be honest, I didn't necessarily love it at first, but it's kind of like that Fender flagship thing. I was just expecting it to be more of a brownish color, whereas it's more of like an off-gray color on this guy. But awesome wood grain on this example. I'm digging that. And it's fairly chunky. I guess that's kind of how the originals are. I always think ash bodies are light, but this one's got a little bit of heft to it. And I honestly quite like this chunky neck profile. They call it a U-shaped neck, but as far as like a big baseball bat from Gibson, this is nowhere near the same. This one feels a lot more rounded. It's not overly fat, but still got a decent bit of chunk to it. So it's definitely super comfortable in my opinion. And I personally really like this figuring mark around the 3rd fret on this guy. That's a nice little touch to this one. And my favorite reissue spec is the types of screws they used on it. It's the original screwdriver flathead screws. And you have that everywhere on this guitar, including on the strap buttons. You have it on the neck. You even have it on the single line Kluson style tuners. I was watching an interview with Seymour Duncan, and he says he remembers those disappearing around 1952. So it's kind of cool to see an early vintage reissue guitar get a very shortly lived spec on electric guitars. But there's only one thing that I really want to complain about. I mean, I've looked it over head to tail. As far as quality control goes, I'm pretty impressed with this. I do not see anything that really stands out. But there's one thing that I feel is a little bit misleading. In Fender's advertisements, they say there is a blend wiring kit that you can install into this in order to get the original Broadcaster blend wiring. I didn't actually know that was supposed to be included when I ordered it, so I went over to the case. I was digging around for it, trying to find it, and then I was like, did musician's friend forget to put it in here? But then I found it. Here is your wiring kit. What sleeps inside is this. You get a single resistor that they're advertising as a wiring kit. I was expecting a whole nother control assembly, like including this top plate, another output jack that you could just install yourself. All you would have to do is reconnect some ground wires. I thought, wow, that's really cool that they did that. But no, you just get this resistor and a wiring diagram. At first look, I thought, okay, it just looks like I need to move that capacitor over there and install the resistor. But the more I was looking at it, it's like, oh, you actually changed quite a bit of stuff. I don't feel comfortable doing that. But now that we know a little bit more about this guy, let's go ahead and throw him on the workbench and take a look at all of its individual parts and specs. Inside the Broadcaster, let's take a look at this stuff. So underneath the pickguard, you can still see the continuation of the ash body, things like that. But let's take a quick look at the guard itself. So this is a 1-ply phenolic fretboard. Apparently that's just something that's kind of unique to this time era. It's just a material that they use that is a little different from the plastics of today. Whenever I think phenolic, I think of Brendan Small with his Snow Falcon, because those guys had phenolic fretboards. But apparently that stuff dates back a lot longer than I ever knew. But underneath the pickup here, you can see that they have the barcode that they typically do. And it's kind of interesting to see these little rubber grommets that they use to help you set the height of the pickup. The screw just goes in between there and then into the body. So it's kind of similar to what Gibson does with the foam blocks for their P90s. And we'll take a quick look at the bridge pickup route. Pretty much the same thing going on here with just a different barcode. But the pickups themselves are hand-wound custom shop 1950 to 1951 Blackguard pups. I've actually already recorded the playing demo. I am in love with these pickups. They're actually pretty darn good. But something that I kind of found interesting here is just the way that this thing is routed. You can actually get to the truss rod to adjust it, so that's a nice little spec. And you can also see it looks like they might actually have a date stamp at the bottom of that neck if I were to take it off. I'm just going to let it be though. The bridge itself, this is a string through design. It just secures by 4 screws right there, which once again, everything is the original screwdriver shape, the flathead, which is kind of a pain to take all this stuff apart. But here we can get a closer look at the serial number of this one. V1974744. That's kind of a cool one. So this is actually a late 2019 made one. And as far as the body routing goes, you can't have a middle pickup. You just have this little wiring channel to help them get it to the control cavity. As far as the wiring itself, it's CTS branded pots with the cloth style wiring. It looks really high quality stuff. And again, you do have that little resistor if you wanted to swap it to the blend circuit. Honestly, I think they should have just shipped it with the blend circuit and let you switch it back. Because looking at this wiring diagram, as a complete amateur with rewires and stuff, this looks a lot more simple to me to do than this. This thing's kind of a mess and scares me. But I'm sure if you're experienced, it's like, yeah, that's pretty simple as well. I'm guessing that they shipped it as a regular Telecaster because it would appeal to more people. But I think, you know, with it being called a Broadcaster, they should have been appealing to the people who wanted the original Broadcaster. But you get the dome-styled knurled knobs with a 3-way switch right here. And again, this is a 2-piece ash body, no weight relief or anything like that, on a 1-piece maple neck. It has a vintage-style 21-fret fretboard, and it uses the vintage tall style wires. I actually found these quite comfortable to play, even though it has the old style 7¼ inch radius. But let's take a quick look at that nice little figuring mark right there on the 3rd fret. I just love that. It's a beautiful little characteristic mark that probably only this one's gonna have. But the top and bottom of this neck is all in nitro finish, so it's a little bit sticky feeling in comparison to the satin finished ones, but you know, it's a vintage spec. The nut width is rather thin, 1.64 inches, and increases to 2.02 at the 12th. First fret neck depth is 0.91, then that increases to 1.01 by the 12th. It's a really nice U-shaped neck. I mean, it's super rounded, but not like overly beefy. I think most people would find this neck to be pretty comfortable. And as far as the headstock goes, you have that special little string tree that they used back then and the Fender Broadcaster decal. You can see the lines around that because, I mean, that's just kind of how it is. And the old style tuners. As far as scale length goes, the traditional 25.5 inches. As far as the backside, nothing too much going on here except for you can see some beautiful wood grain on this example. I mean, this one's pretty crazy. This one's got a little bit more of a wider ring to it, whereas this is just super tight and ringy. So you get kind of the best of both worlds.
pieced together right there. And it is a string-through Telecaster design, and you get a special Broadcaster Anniversary neck plate right here. And once again, take a second to appreciate the flathead screws. Back of the neck, just traditional stuff, walnut skunk stripe with a maple neck, nice and rounded once again, with the Fender Kluson style tuners back here. With again, the flathead screws. Nothing went non-flathead on this guitar. Not even the strap buttons. This example weighs 8 pounds, 6.7 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds.
Now that we know all about the Fender 70th Anniversary Broadcaster, what are my final thoughts on this thing? This is like that traditional super spanky Telecaster sound. I was really digging playing this guitar. I love the sound of like the prime country guitar licks. It's not necessarily my favorite genre of music, but those guys definitely knew how to do some guitar stuff. And this guitar definitely captured some of that really twanginess that the Telecasters are known for. So if you're after a Telecaster that has more of that vintage sound to it, I think you're gonna enjoy these Broadcasters. This instrument is really for somebody who appreciates the history of the Telecaster and the original Broadcaster naming of it. But is it necessarily worth a huge premium over other Telecasters if you're only looking for playability? No, I mean, you could build a parts caster. There's other Teles that you could get at a much lesser price point, but you might sacrifice some things like what the body's made of or what finish it has. But I think you'll have a lot of fun with this guitar if you do decide to buy one. And being that it's a limited edition only made in 2020, I'm sure these things will hold value okay, because they probably won't reissue them again for another good 10 to 30 years within the USA lineup for their 100th anniversary. So let's go ahead and check this one out under Blacklight. Nothing too crazy going on here under Blacklight, but you do see that the body glows a little bit because, again, it is that full nitro finish, so that means this thing will get some weather checking, it'll age real nice, you won't get like huge chips off of it like you can sometimes get with the poly finishes. So there is some pros and cons to having the true nitro on one of these Fender guitars. But yeah, there you can kind of see the decal that they put on it. So again, they just kind of went chop to get rid of the Broadcaster when they had to back historically. So pretty cool looking here under Blacklight. Let's go ahead and check out the case. Straight from the factory, these things come with a tweed hardshell case. I don't like the way these things feel. It's like yucky. I had one once that kind of felt like cloth, and I definitely preferred that one over this tweed style. But you have two locking latches on either side, and then a little clasp in the middle with the Fender logo right there.
And on the inside, you get tons of case candy with this thing. First off, you get a real bovine leather strap. Honestly, this thing is super uncomfortable, but you know, it's a nice little piece of case candy, but not something I would use. You get your little resistor as well as your wiring diagram. Inside here will sleep your ashtray cover for your bridge should you wish to use it. They tell you about the lacquer finishes in here. You get your Fender manual with the certificate of authenticity, if I can get to it. There we go. It also has the Fender 70th Anniversary logo on it. Case tags and keys, silica packets, and I was really surprised that they give you a nice little cable right here. That's a nice touch, as well as a little baggie to keep all this stuff in. And the case itself also has the 70th Anniversary Broadcaster embroidered on it, so it's the only case that you could really use for this guitar. Thank you, Troglodytes, for tuning in to this episode of the Trogly's Guitar Show. I hope you enjoyed learning about the 70th Anniversary Broadcaster from Fender for the 2020 model year lineup. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.